So it either can be set to a completely on state or an off state. Same thing here with the bypass listener effects. That can be set to the on state or off state here. The listener effects will be placed from the listener itself and only react to the listener here. So the source can choose to ignore any listener specific effects that would be there. Now again, on the listener here, you see that there's not really in a way we can add more functionality or anything to the listener. So what do I mean by a listener effect? Well, you can set up effects in the scene that again will directly affect the listener as a whole. So anything that goes to the listener will have that in the pipeline between the two. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay. There is the ability to make reverb zones that are out there. We were just kind of talking about a reverb zone. So you can make a reverb zone and have an audio source obey or completely ignore the reverb zone that you set up. So the zone would just be kind of like these little blue handles that are here. Anytime that you cross into that region, then the reverb would be applied to any audio source that would be obeying that reverb zone. Otherwise, if it's not obeying it, this is checked, and that's what that is. Play on awake. So the awake method that is inside of the engine here, when it wakes and the scene starts, the awake is right before that. It will start playing audio technically before the start is ever hit. So as start is approaching and it launches, awake will be called, so you'll hear sounds, start to see things, and then the game starts, or simulation. The loop property here, again, a Boolean loop state. Check this here, it will loop over and over and over. Since this is music, I'm going to go ahead and just hit the loop and play on awake. So as soon as my scene starts, I hear music, and it will continuously go and run until the end of time. You see this priority field here. There is a high and a low setting here, and it goes from 0 to 256 as far as values that are there. This is actually to set the level of priority. You have 256 available priority spots, but a higher priority sound, say if you're swapping in a lot of clips here and there, higher priority sounds will always take priority over the lower priority sounds. So if we ever run out of streams and that sort of thing, priority will kick into effect, and some sounds will not be audible and some sounds will, based off of their priority positions. Volume, exactly what it says. So you can completely mute a track just by its volume by turning it all the way to 0, but it goes from 0 all the way to 1. And this is a float property that you can adjust, and all of these things here can be addressed in code. So you can address all of these things in script once you have the ability to access the game object and the audio source directly. So it's not anything new or different from where you might have been experimenting with some of the other features of the engine and that sort of thing. Not really any different on the audio side. Pitch, we have the ability to go from -3 all the way to +3. So we can change the pitch of a sound, like so. Okay. So if I were to by changing the pitch, I can manipulate that in the scene. So there's that. Okay, stereo pan. You have the ability to pan from left to right. If this is just being handled as a 2D sound, that could be very helpful to just make sure that it's only heard on one side of your output sound setup, on the left or on the right. There's a spatial blend property that's here, and it's also from 0 to 1. And this is really a state of a mixing between a 2D state and a 3D state. Now, what is the 3D state? The 3D state will also have, because as we expect, we would expect our sounds to behave and react. What did I do? I think I changed I changed something. I think it was the pitch, but just to keep the demo moving, I'm going to make sure that I just completely can every change that I've done to this. Okay. Just to make sure that, yeah, because I'm sure I touched every possible setting that's here. So just resetting it there. So the spatial blend is currently set to 2D, but what if we set it to 3D? So we hear it, but notice as we approach it and as we go away from it, it gets quieter and quieter and quieter. Now here's what's actually going on. Once the 3D portion of this here is enabled, or if it's mixed enough to where the 3D component becomes apparent here, what's actually happening is it's applying a few different effects to this sound source. What it's doing is it's enabling Doppler Effect, which the Doppler Effect, as you are to move around from the object here, you hear the shift, the pitch shift in frequencies as they collapse. And if you want to kind of look up the Doppler Effect, you can see some rudimentary physics videos demonstrate that for you. The spread as well here, the 3D sound source, you can spread this around between the state of the placement of this here and how it is spread around from 0 to the maximum volume level that's set. In this case here, it's 1. You'll see this little blue bar appear on this graph. And what is this graph? Well, you have the ability to set the minimum distance that an object can interact with this here. So it can go all the way up to this minimum distance, and that would be where the peak of the sound is heard. And that we set for 1. Now, this 1 that's here, everything in Unity is done in meters. So this here is 1 meter and 500 meters for the maximum distance. Well, 500 meters, just to give you an idea of the scale of that. So I have source selected. You see this blue globe that's starting to appear? That's 500 meters. So that's really large. So if we were to shrink this down to kind of maybe the confines of our demo here, maybe even a little bit smaller. Well, I lost. There we go. As I move this around, I can't see it down here. There we go. As I move this around, you see max distance starting to change. So yeah, if we were to change max distance, say something like 20, now you could see that there is a place where you can get outside of this sphere. So what does that mean? What does the max distance mean? Here it could become very quiet. What it's actually doing is you see the listener moving away from the source or moving closer to the source. And as it moves, it follows this volume roll-off curve. So what's actually happening is it's following this logarithmic roll-off that's been placed on here by default. That's just by default it goes logarithmic because that feels very natural. There's also a linear roll-off. There's the ability to customize your roll-off where you can change how this works and add points to it if you'd like, and you can even get pretty crazy with this. So you can customize and change your roll-off however you'd like it to be. So as it approaches the listener, it then will change in max volume played. Volume, the property up here. Okay. So I'm going to set it back to logarithmic roll-off, and I'm going to do one extra thing. I'm going to take this all the way down. So when I get really far from the listener, it just completely is dead silent. You hear it loud. You hear it panning from left to right. It's automatically handling it via the space, and it's gone. Now watch this box down here. You see the listener? Let me turn my guy around. Where's my box? Let me start it over. There we go. See the listener get closer, closer, and then as I get away from it, there it is, and silent. So cool. That is the 3D sound set here. Now the Doppler, I'm going to turn this up really crazy high. You'll hear the Doppler effect. Maybe this is not the best sound to hear the Doppler, but you'll kind of hear it shift where it's kind of that as it goes back and forth. Yeah, I do make sound effects. If you did not want that property, you can just simply put it to 0 and no more Doppler. So it's up to you. Okay, watch the spread as I'm going to raise this up to about the halfway point. So you can kind of see that it spreads across the two different zones here. If you were to also to bring down the spatial blend, see how now it's ignoring it because it's mixed these two states together. It's really ignoring a lot of the 3D properties that are here. So you will find instances where you may want to subtly, just very subtly ignore some of the properties of the 3D engine, so that it always is there, and maybe it's not so very hard panned left or right. So you can use the spread and the spatial blend to kind of manipulate these a little bit. In the instance here where we want it to completely shut off at a certain point, you'll need to make sure that it is handled completely as a 3D sound. So there it is. So the game engine has the ability to use our audio sources that are placed inside of the engine in a very smart and intelligent sense that automatically handles pans. We don't have to worry about pans so much here. Don't have to worry about a lot of the roll-offs and the attenuation of the volume. So imagine having to write code for every time that you need, the player is X amount of distance away, you have to attenuate the sound this much. So the engine will handle all of that as any other game engine does already. So nothing really new there, but for a first timer here, you might be worried about some of these sorts of things. So that's the audio source component, and I'm going to go ahead and follow up with the next add-on to that, which is going to be the audio mixer itself. For that, I'm going to go ahead and swap over to another project and another video, and I'll bring you up to speed on that.